Well, again, thanks everybody. Thanks for having me back. It's fun to see the growth that's happened at the campus, at the School of Science. I won't kind of get too reminiscent about things, but certainly want to be able to talk about what this experience has been like over the past, golly molly, 30 some odd years. What I'm going to talk about obviously has at some level very specifically applied to me, but my approach has been very, what I'd like to think of as integratively diverse. I've been interested in a variety of different kinds of things. Some have gone very broad, some have gone very deep. So I hope that what I'm going to talk about today will at least give you some ideas of general kinds of things that are possible. If there's some specific things that you might have an interest in that you'd like to have me do a deeper dive in, maybe in a future talk, or if you want to just email me with some questions or something like that, I can try and be of help that way. So I really kind of feel like a lot of my experiences at IUPUI prepared me to have a portfolio career. As Tyler said, I graduated with a BS in psychology from the School of Science, excuse me, but I also graduated before that with an associate's in engineering. So there's been a bit of an overlap with that as well. And I guess, maybe the best place to start is a little bit of origin story. And to begin my journey, I probably started off not much different than the rest of you guys. I was actually born in Texas, but lived on the farm with my dad for a while in Plainfield. And there I am kind of doing my Batman. And it's really been kind of a twisty, turny kind of road since then. Most recently, in terms of academics, I was at the Center for Global Health, which is part of the College of Medicine at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And prior to that, I was on the faculty at the Department of Psychiatry there, even though as a psychologist, which is a little bit of a rare thing. And we can talk more about that maybe at the Q&A at the end. Before I was at University of Illinois, I was at, excuse me, at Northwestern University, also in their School of Medicine, Feinberg School of Medicine, and worked in the Department of Behavioral Science and Psychiatry. And this was back in the day in the, pardon me, in the early days in behavioral health and psychology and psychiatry that there really weren't a whole lot of outcome studies being done. People pretty much got into the orthodoxy of their approach. You were an Adlerian, or you were a behaviorist, or you were a psychoanalytic or an oriented therapist, or a humanistically oriented therapist. And they're really, sort of like whatever you grew up with, your training became the kind of thing that, that you did with all of your patients, no matter what. So I worked with John Lyons and Ken Howard, Michael O'Mahony, and Jennifer Lash, and we looked at kind of what helps people get better in psychotherapy, what types of psychotherapy, and what kinds of disorders, et cetera. And it really kind of set me on a trajectory to looking at outcome studies. Again, we'll circle back to that in just a second. Parallel to that, in the 90s, the TED Talks, that's probably everyone's familiar with, started. Way back then, they were started by a fellow named Richard Saul Wurman. And Richard and I really kind of hit it off. He was very much into what he called information architecture. So my background in engineering at IUPUI, the associates in architecture, really kind of gave me that bug and that interest. He and I connected and wound up doing I contributed, he was obviously the major person in it, in a book called Understanding USA. And it really sort of brought back issues that I had interest in terms of research, in terms of what would later be called data analytics, and looking at quantitative kinds of aspects of psychology and behavioral therapy outcomes. As you may know, the T in TED is for technology, and so there's a lot of technology in that. This is Dean Kamen. He's the inventor of this iBot chair. He was also the founder of the first robotics competitions. And through Richard, he and I met, and he invited me to be part of his engineering and technology robotics competitions, which was really fun and great for me to kind of geek out in that area. Parallel to all these kinds of things, then still, I'm thinking in behavioral health and psychology and clinical work and looking at outcomes, and the advent of being able to have an electronic medical record that everyone sort of takes for granted today did not exist when I was first starting out. So the kind of having a little bit of a look towards the future and having an interest and I should also say too, when I started in the School of Science, it was not as a psychology major, it was actually as a math major, because that was the way that you got into computer science back in 1977. So I had an interest in computers, interest in engineering, interest in technology, et cetera. And you can start to see how a lot of these things will be foundational to some of the other interests and things that I've had, and that I hope that I can encourage you all to kind of pursue those interests as well. So this was a great way to kind of quantify, get these kinds of data to be able to look at outcomes and look at how patients do. Through this process, when I first started off in my clinical work, I was very terrified that I would misdiagnose someone, that I would treat someone coming in with depression with cognitive behavioral therapy, which was my approach, and lo and behold, find out that they had an endocrine disorder that I had not diagnosed, which I would have difficulty diagnosing, not having a whole lot of medical training. So I put together a very, very rudimentary kind of program that helped me do a differential psychodiagnostic program to be able to kind of sort out what's a true psychiatric disorder versus a medical disorder that might be mimicking a psychiatric disorder. And because I was also teaching at that time, I got very interested in, well, this wasn't so hard. I can teach other people and show how other people can use kind of software, off the shelf, so to speak, without needing to know back in the day Fortran or BASIC or anything like that, which is really kind of fun. Still having this interest in technology in the later 90s, then the dot-com era came and went, and I got involved with a variety of startups in that area. I still work in that space in a little different type of startup. And also parallel to that, I got involved with working in the nonprofit area, which we'll talk a lot about today, and then actually started my own nonprofit called Center for Global Initiatives. I still could not let go of the whole engineering thing and still loved publishing. So I also did articles that wound up in engineering journals and whatnot. So I really did not kind of stick to the parochial channel, which sometimes can be a good thing and sometimes can be problematic depending upon what your goals are. And again, kind of all these things wound up in another book I did with John Wiley and Sons with colleague Randy Hayes called The Evidence-Based Practice, really looking at treatment guidelines and evidence-based approaches to providing behavioral health care in whatever kind of setting, outpatient, inpatient, et cetera. So a lot of this, when I would work on something and have an interest in something, I'd go kind of deep into it. And it led to, as Tyler mentioned, 38 books, and just really enjoying the process of writing and getting those things out there as well, which was also very helpful. Someone I'm a big fan of is R. Buckminster Fuller. Some of you probably know of his work. And he talked about something called the processional effect, and kind of in a very gross, simple way to say it is that, for example, a bee going to a flower and inadvertently pollinating that flower is a processional effect. It's a positive byproduct of doing something that you perhaps had the intention of, didn't have the primary intention of doing. I kind of refer to this as content stacking, and that's a lot of the aspects that I think have been very helpful in the process that I've approached my career and my work. And one of those things led to this book, which was I was writing a lot and doing a lot in behavioral health and psychology, but I had some interests in terms of policy development, in terms of political science, et cetera. And I didn't know exactly how to test out these ideas, where to trial them, who would I talk to about these kinds of things. So I got the gumption up and submitted a proposal to a multidisciplinary talk that was in Cairo, hence the background there. And it really got me out of my comfort zone. I was talking to, it was the first conference I ever went to where I presented before a group that wasn't all psychologists. It was a group that was not all North American or American. It was a group that was made up of such diversity of backgrounds and perspectives and cultures and languages that it was really a rich, albeit a little intimidating kind of experience to do. Connected with a number of those people, asked for criticism and feedback to my talk and some of my ideas, which they very freely and helpfully gave. And I put all that into a book that we did with Prager called The Integration of Psychological Principles in Policy Development. It was really kind of my first foray outside of psychology to be able to start to build in that arena. That then led to an opportunity, continuing an interest in policy and where psychology can play a role, was at the United Nations. As some of you may know, the American Psychological Association has NGO, non-governmental organization relationship with the United Nations. And as some of you may or may not know, you can apply to be able to be a special representative to the United Nations. And that's what I did. And part of what I think was helpful in being able to get this kind of a position was doing, cross-cultural, multidisciplinary kinds of work, not just specific to psychology, not just specific to clinical psychology, but much more generalized and global, but with the connecting thread of psychology to it. So way back when, this expired in 2000, but I did it in 1990 and 1998 and 99. I would go out to Washington, to New York on my own dime from Chicago. I was one of the unique people at the time that didn't live in the New York City area, and came out and worked on a project, which I'll talk more about in just a second. Kind of a cool closing of that circle was that just recently in 2018, with a much worse haircut, went back out to the United Nations and did another consultation. And this opportunity was during a recognition of work of women in the world. I was able to bring my daughter along with me as well. So that aspect of working with the United Nations and having that book come out on policy connected my publisher at Prager, connected me up with a wonderful fellow, Harvey Langholtz, who is a professor of social psychology at the College of William and Mary. And he also had worked at the UN while he was still in the military in the Coast Guard under Madeleine Albright there at the United Nations when she was Secretary of State. So he then put together this book, The Psychology of Peacekeeping. Our publisher put us together and we became BFFs immediately. So he and I put together The Psychology of Diplomacy. We parsed out the book that the first half of it was around diplomatic issues and specific to UN kinds of issues. And the second half of the book was some of the work that I had done there, as well as other psychology colleagues there, to be able to see where psychology can bring forth issues around climate change, around economic issues, around healthcare issues, global health, children and women's issues, et cetera, democratic issues as well too. So the point in saying all this is that it really kind of lends an opportunity to look at things from an academic perspective and from a research perspective, which is very important to me. But then I also had this itch that I wanted to get involved with a little bit more boots on the ground, so to speak. I wanted to get involved in more activistic kinds of ways and actually doing other kinds of things. So I signed up for a 3-week mission with Flying Doctors of America. My first trip with them was to Halong Bay, where we worked in a hospital that was over 100 years old, built by the French originally, and had no electricity, no running water, and no glass in the windows. And because I was a child and family therapist, I worked with the pediatricians and worked with the kids there as well too. Did not do anything psychological, but just basically help because, again, I'm kind of good with data and good with numbers and organization, put together the formulary for all the donated medications that we had. So whenever there was a certain kind of need for some kind of medication for this or that, I was able to kind of quickly and expeditiously be able to get that to them. And then that really kind of fed into the pleasure that I had, the enjoyment that I had, the humbling experience I had with volunteering. And then that begat kind of what I've written a lot about. And if you've seen on LinkedIn, that's kind of, I refer to myself as an accidental humanitarian. I didn't take any classes at IUPUI. I didn't take any webinars or anything like that to kind of learn more about humanitarian intervention, but basically kind of like Mr. Magoo kind of came into it by virtue of volunteering and seeing what could be done in the nonprofit and non-governmental organization space. And as I mentioned earlier, then have subsequently developed in 2007, the Center for Global Initiatives, which I would encourage if any of you are interested in a variety of free resources around, in particular, global health, again, with the connecting thread of psychology, please do go visit our site, centerforglobalinitiatives.org. So that then developed into kind of cascading and parallel tracks there to being able to do a podcast. So we're now in our 5th season. Not everything has a humanitarian perspective with it, but most all of our guests either very full-throatedly do and work in that space. Others may do it as part of a combination of kind of their own portfolio type of career and the kinds of things that they're involved with. So please do. It's called Living Life in Full, and please do check it out if you're interested in podcasts. So for me, it really does feel like, it has been quite the long, strange trip. And I think one of the beneficial things for me was that there's really a lot, I think, that can be done with the psychology degree. There was an article published in the 70s, Richardson, Gottfriedson, that had this table in it. And it just almost kind of became a little bit of a roadmap for me in terms of, gosh, these are all the kinds of things. And this was just, in an article, there's, hundreds of other things that psychologists can get involved with too. But it just kind of gave me this idea of what other psychologists that were subjects in this study were able to be a part of and to be able to do, and really kind of helped me kind of brainstorm and blue sky think, wow, would this be a possibility? Would this be something that I'd like to do? And how would I go about doing that and deconstructing it and being able to make that part of my career trajectory? And I should also say too, with that reference, at the end, I'll give you a couple of links where everything that I've talked about, including a copy of this PowerPoint and an even longer version of this PowerPoint and a longer version of it in terms of a video on YouTube, is also available to you. So don't worry if you miss a hypertext link or anything like that. We'll have that all available. And as you saw at the beginning, this is being recorded as well. So enough about me. Let's talk about you guys. What do you want to do with a psychology degree? I think obviously there's a variety of things that it can lead you to do in terms of careers, just with a bachelor's or with a master's or with a doctorate or moving on. But the perplexing aspect may be, gosh, there are so many different kinds of things. Where is it that I would actually start? Well, you're going to get a biased lecture from me today about that, because I tend to lean into the areas of where psychology can make a difference. I think this is just it's nice eye candy because of the colors and everything, but I think it's a great demonstration of all the different possible careers, not necessarily in psychology, but I could see psychology, again, being this thread that's woven through all these different kinds of aspects. And again, it's kind of a freewheeling brainstorming. What are the kinds of things that you might have an interest in? Is it humanitarian action? Is it nonviolent social change? Is it, what are subcategories of that? Justice and healing, et cetera, translational justice. So these are the kinds of things where you might start to say, well, I have an interest in that, but how would I get a job in that? Or what are the jobs in that? Or what are there graduate programs that I can learn more about? So that's what I'm going to talk with you all today. One of my favorites, and this is just going to be kind of a laundry list, is Idealist, if you're not already familiar with it. It's got, over 100,000 different kinds of organizations, over 6,000 jobs, internships. They've just semi-recently added graduate programs to it. So just simply Idealist. I forget if it's .org or .com, but check out Idealist if that's an area that you want to start to take a look in. They have a subcategory that's specific to nonprofit careers once you're on that website as well. So you can check out this, idealistcareers.org, and then get redirected once you're into that site. The Alliance for Conflict Transformation has a wonderful career guide where they've done a lot of research of different kinds of organizations and practitioners and kind of interviewed them and said, what makes for a top candidate for work in this area or a top candidate for this kind of a program? Who is it that bubbles to the top of your hiring list if you have an interest in people that have skills coming to you? There's also, if you're more interested around the sides in the areas of global health, which is obviously a sweet spot that I now find myself in, there's Global Health Core, and there's a variety of different kinds of, it focuses on young, but I know people might be traditional or non-traditional college age, so it kind of doesn't matter, even if you're out of school, even if you're, 10 years postgraduate or something like that. This is a wonderful site to kind of get ideas, get links, and learn more. Of course, I'm guessing the majority of the audience today is in psychology, so please do join if you haven't already. The APA and your local state, Indiana, or whatever state you might hail from, would be going back to Psychological Association. I'm very biased. I found that working with the APA was very helpful for me in a variety of different kinds of ways, a variety of resources. Once you're in it, and I don't know, because I'm obviously in, so everything kind of defaults to my password, so I don't know how much of these are just generally public. If you're not a member, APA tends to be pretty open about those kinds of things. But just to give you an example, just recently, March 31st, there was a virtual job fair, And there are all kinds of things. There are academic positions, there are research positions, there are clinical positions, there are with undergraduate degrees to graduate degrees to postdoctoral things. So please do check those out, have an awareness of those, get on those mailing lists, et cetera. Your state and the APA will never be less expensive to join than it is right now. I should also say too, if you're more qualitatively and scientifically oriented, academically oriented, the American Psychological Society, which was an off-split from about 25-ish years ago from the APA, also kind of focuses in on that. There's also the Midwestern Psychological Association that I've had the pleasure to present at a number of times, that is always in Chicago. It's coming up now. I think it might be in the next couple of weeks in May. So, check that out, see what that's like. Join things now. It's never cheaper as a graduate student or undergraduate student to kind of see what's what with these. And again, just being a supporter of your state psychological association. This was a free webinar on playing the long game and becoming a recognized expert. So just again, there's a variety of things that are just very educational, very enjoyable to take. I've also been very involved with what the APA calls their Office of International Affairs. And this has been recent, in 2017, I guess it was, maybe 18. I went on a collegial trip with them to Kosovo, and we worked with our colleagues there, psychologists there, and some of the graduate programs there and undergraduate programs in Kosovo for about 10 days. Prior to that, when I was early career, I was able to get 2 different travel grants that helped offset travel costs to be able to go give presentations internationally, which is probably one of the other things that kind of gave me the bug. But go to apa.org/international, see what they have. I was also involved in a group, CERP, Committee on International Relations in Psychology, and we published booklets that are PDFs that are downloadable for free. There's just a number of free resources. Get on their mailing list, etc. Again, I'm not sure about needing to be a member. I'm guessing maybe not to do that, but at least you can certainly see, I think, 99% of all these resources at any point in time. If you're not familiar with the APA has a number of divisions. I can't keep up with how many. I think it's maybe pushing 60 or maybe even gone past that at this point. But one of the ones that I've been very involved with historically is Division 52, which is the Division of International Psychology. They have a great newsletter. They have a great journal. They're great people, great sessions if you go to an APA conference and they have their breakouts and things like that. Great group of folks. You'll fit right in if you have these kinds of interests. And they also have job postings. Theirs tend to be a little bit more around research and academia, but if that's your interest, then spot on. Otherwise, you might also see things that come across that are of interest. With my Center for Global Initiatives, we also have a Facebook presence, and I oftentimes will post in there scholarships or other people. This is one that's been posted by others, so feel free to join there. No costs or anything, of course, and you can kind of keep up with what's current and trending. We probably post 2 to 3 times a week. And a recent organization that I've just found out about by virtue of a guest that I've recently done an interview for my show is an organization called 80,000 Hours. They're based out of the UK, which doesn't really make any difference, but they are just a top flight from everything that I can kind of assess about them. They have 2 different podcasts. You can sign up for their emails. They're fantastic. I think you can even get like a free copy of 1 of 4 of their books if you would like, physical copy mailed to you from Amazon, etc. Just a great group of people, and their focus is that in your career, you've probably got about 80,000 hours that you'll be doing in some kind of professional way. Why not make those 80,000 hours count in high impact careers working generally in the nonprofit, non-governmental kind of areas? So again, that's my bias. That's kind of what I lean into in global generality. So I hope those might be things that will be helpful for you as well. So some ways to maximize your potential. One of the things that you may face, it's not going to be something you're facing if you're getting just like a little temporary job, being a barista at Starbucks or something like that. So these don't count for that. But if there's that really fantastic job, if there's that really competitive graduate program that you want to get into, that really competitive internship or postdoctoral fellowship, you're going to be in competition with a variety of other people that are very similar to you. They've got great grades, got great letters of recommendation, they've done everything in the world, they've volunteered, et cetera, et cetera. So then the question comes, how can you distinguish yourself? If there's 100 applicants, and 10 of the applicants are stellar like you, and you're one of those 10, and they have two positions. How do you get to be one of those two for those positions? Well, there's a variety of ways to do that. I think, and there's probably more than what I'll even talk about, but I just kind of want to spin it down to a few. Scott Adams, who you may know, he's the cartoonist and humorist that created the comic strip Dilbert. He says that if you want to be extraordinary, you have two different ways to do it. Either be the Michael Jordan of whatever it is that you want to do, or be very good, like in the top 25% of at least two or more things. So for him, he felt that I'm not going to be an artist, I'm not going to be a business consultant, I'm not going to do stand-up comedy. But if I combine drawing and business and humor, then he could, that's what led to him creating Dilbert. So the key is really that no two people are alike. None of those applicants are exactly like you, but taking your unique set of skills, you're able to then create I would think, a very distinguishing value prop to be able to get that position. The ways to do that, again, this isn't for Starbucks, but it's really, if you're looking to apply to graduate school or a job, or if you're in graduate school and you need to, get a pre-doc internship or a postdoc fellowship, please do your homework. And the first job, I do this in the context of like thinking about a job or thinking about an academic graduate school, something like that. Just to be clear for this hypothetical, I'm just going to lean into talking about graduate school. So do your research on that university. What are they known for? There's certain areas, certain universities that are known specifically for things. Within that, what is the department's notable aspects? Who are the leaders of that department or leaders? Like, for example, who's the chair of the department, who's most recent chair, what kinds of committees do they have, et cetera. All these things should be fairly easily publicly available with Google and going to their website. What are the faculty's interests? What are the other students' interests? What are they working on vis-a-vis their dissertations? Take a look at the application form and the application process and start to deconstruct, because the questions that are going to be asked in the application are probably going to be the questions that are going to be asked of you in some type of interview situation. So it's really incumbent upon you to be able to be super prepared for those things. And maybe one of the ways to think about that is, why is it that you want to apply either whatever school it is or schools that it is, because you'll probably be applying to more than one. What is it about those sites that are important to you? And as you think about that, envision what would it be like if I were working at XYZ University as a graduate student, as a fellow, if I did my internship at this hospital, et cetera. What would my life be like there? What would I enjoy doing? And then those answers will kind of inform what comes next in terms of what I think you need to do for your homework. And there's basically three, in my opinion, critical must-do aspects. The first thing, and again, this is back to being distinctive, is your cover letter. Passively demonstrate that you've done your homework. Don't ever cut and paste your letter. There's certain things you might be able to, like, your introduction or your, maybe things you might say about yourself or whatever, but really make it so that you demonstrate that you are an expert on that program, that you know their site, you know the leadership. Again, let's keep it in academia, that what this department got a great big grant from the NIH to do this kind of study. Whoever you may be interviewing with or whoever may be reviewing your cover letter, have read their work, see what they've published, know their research, know what their grant record is like, know what it is that they have done that you then make a great fit to be able to go into, that they would love to have you be part of their research team, that you bring something that would help augment, that would help be very appropriate to what it is that they're wanting to do, and that you're wanting to do this as well too. Don't come across with any kind of ego with this, but really balance that it is a good fit. It's data, it's a good fit. Balance this with humility so that there's no untoward aspect of being misunderstood. And then, so let's say that letter works and your submission works. Now you've got the interview. So not only be prepared to go through the interview as the interviewee, but also be prepared to be the interviewer. We all know that at the end of any interview, people always say, well, do you have any questions for us? And you don't necessarily even have to wait to be asked those. But when that happens, to be yes, as a matter of fact, and you open up your notebook and you then have the 5, 10, X number of questions that you have based upon having done your research in the first step. And that you take notes when they talk about things. Being in an interview is an anxiety producing situation, and you're used to taking notes in anxiety producing situations. And that shows, I think it tacitly communicates respect and seriousness and a variety of other good, positive kinds of things that, hopefully, I presume everyone will be doing this. So, and it's a good thing to do, and it's, to me, relatively obvious, but maybe if people aren't doing that, that it, will be a distinguishing factor for you. I would also recommend, I've seen some people do it, like take notes on their phone, very fast thumbs, do that. I would recommend not doing that because it could be misinterpreted as, checking your phone or doing something else or being distracted. If you're analog ink and paper, there's not going to be any, confusion on whoever else is in the room as part about that. No, it's good to know about the mechanics of the position, but then also talk about what are their goals after you finish this grant. What's the next thing you want to do? Do you have your ideas on, doing this kind of thing or that kind of thing? By the way, I would like to do my dissertation in this area, and here's some of the questions that I would like to work on. Is this something that your department has an interest in, or is there someone that I could also work with in this area? So let them know that there's a good synthetic fit of kind of what they're doing, where they're going, what you want to do, where you're going as well. And, demonstrate to them through nonverbal and verbal ways the enthusiasm in your voice, that you're darn glad to be there, that you're comfortable, that you're professional. They'll appreciate that there's some anxiety with that, and it's always going to be some performance issues with it. But just, be yourself, be sincere and authentic. It's fine to, flatter them, but, don't go overboard with that. And then once you finish the interview, you're not done. The third thing is you need to do a follow-up letter. And one of the things that I have found that has been super helpful when I've had the opportunity to do this is I kind of put my hat on as thinking, okay, I'm a consultant. I learned a lot of things that I didn't know about the company that I couldn't find off Google or couldn't find off their website by virtue of having this conversation. It's hot off the press. It's planned. It's something that they shared with me that's, they're not quite sure if they're going to do it or not, et cetera. It's not quite, ready for prime time. So think about how you could say, I thought about what you said, and that really sounded interesting to me. And here's some ideas that I have that I think would be helpful. Here's an area that I think that I didn't really think about until, on the drive home, that I felt like it could really be helpful with. So, follow up with that you're still thinking about it, that it still demonstrates, that goodness of fit. And then again, very modestly and humbly, the appreciation for the time, and that you're able to have that kind of connection with them. One of the other things then, if they're looking at you as a serious candidate, they might start to do some other kinds of background research on you. All of us are used to putting together our curriculum vitae, our resumes, et cetera. But it doesn't really say a whole lot else about, kind of what we're all about. That's kind of like the score versus the color commentary in sports. So if you're currently in a job and you want to move up in that job, then your target audience is really impressing the people that you work with, because you want to get promoted, you want to get a bonus, you want to get a raise, you want to stay there, you want to be able to become vice president someday, something like that. If you're a new graduate, your audience is going to be a little different. Hey, I'm just out of school. I need to find work. My target audience is having a good brand that it's going to make it easy for recruiters to find me and help them find me the job that I would like to get. So if you haven't already realized it, you already have an online brand. You just may not realize that it's out there. I think we all have our Instas and our TikToks and our whatever else that we're involved with, but it's also important to build out the brand if you haven't already on LinkedIn. So take a look at all the different places that you have accounts. Do go Google yourself and go a few levels down into it. When I'm prepping for an interview with a podcast guest, it's amazing how much stuff that I can find on people that it's, 10, 15 years old, even stuff that I thought, might have predated ever, being posted or anything like that. It's really kind of an interesting archaeological dig. So, check yourself. And if you feel happy, if, someone's, third page down, so to speak, on Google, with whatever shows up for you, then, then good, bravo, well done. And there's nothing for you to worry about. If there is something a little hinky, then, take a look at it. Also think about, that's all the online stuff, but what's your in-person brand? What's your physical presentation? How articulate are you? How good are you with eye contact with people? Do you make them feel comfortable when they're around you? Do you feel comfortable when you're around them? That type of thing. And if not, then work on it. So I did mention LinkedIn. I think it might be a little less typical for undergraduates and maybe even some graduates to have a LinkedIn profile. And sometimes LinkedIn can be kind of this intimidating thing. So I want to deconstruct it for you. It's nothing to be afraid of. But some little data and statistics that I just recently dug up for this talk is that new hires made through LinkedIn more than doubled in the last quarter of 2021. So it's important to have a presence there. People who include a summary receive up to 3.9 times as many profile views. And it's sort of amazing. I will see a lot of folks, they'll reach out to me. I'm a LinkedIn influencer, so I'll get a lot of pings oftentimes. And I'll take I'll say, well, who is this? I don't know this person. And it's fine to connect with them because it's, businessy. It's not like Facebook where you really kind of do need to know people. But it's sort of amazing to me how many pictures I see as absent. I don't know, who is this, even a real person? Is this some kind of bizarre hack? So some tips, employers really don't expect you to have much of a LinkedIn profile, like I said, when you're first, getting started, but do include both a profile photo and a background photo. It's really super important. The research says that having your photo on there makes your profile 21 times more likely to be viewed. So here's what mine looks like as an example. So there I am. Here is just a bizarre abstract picture of a picture that I took in a hotel one time of a CTA track in Chicago. I just sort of liked it. I wanted something vague because I don't know, maybe it's the Rorschach-ian TAT in me of having people project whatever, but I just wanted something that might be kind of visually interesting and doesn't necessarily, hopefully creating kind of weird biases or anything like that. This is the About section. I'll say a little bit more about in just a second, but make sure that it's filled out. And then these are all searchable as well, too. These are all up to you. You can put them in any order. I think there is a character limit, but you can put those in, play with them anytime you want. And then I get this extra little LinkedIn balloon, so to speak, or in balloon because of being a LinkedIn influencer. So if someone you connect with or want to connect with is an influencer, that's a bigger deal. And you can also then follow them and see what their posts and stuff look like. So in all that About area, and all the different kinds of things that you can put below your name, please do use keywords with that. Those are all searchable, not only within LinkedIn and people that are headhunters within LinkedIn, but also they trigger in Google as well. So think about an elevator pitch, which is just basically 5 to 7 sentences that tell a potential employer or whoever else may be looking at your profile a little bit more about you. And rather than just saying, I have a 3.9 out of 4 GPA, I have a blah, 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 write it in narrative, avoid bullets and resume talk, and talk about kind of what you learned about yourself while you've been in undergrad or graduate school. And that's perfectly fine to include volunteering, or you were involved, you're an athlete, you're involved in sports, or you took care of an ailing parent, or anything along those lines are quite apropos. Right now, too, you have the opportunity to put in a hashtag open to work. Research says that people that do that are 40% more likely to get messages from recruiters because it just kind of very obviously telegraphs that you are available. And also then consider making meaningful connections in different kinds of groups. LinkedIn, there's a pro tip, and as you can see here, and circled in yellow, is there's an IUPUI alumni network. So go into that and check out kind of what's what. We can see that there's a student athlete, et cetera. So see who's in there, and then search for alumni by keyword or company or title. If you're going to be interviewing with someone, you can certainly, this goes back to your making notes and doing your due diligence on checking their company out, checking them out, especially if they're not necessarily academics, if it's more of a job, to kind of see what they've done and see where they've worked and where there might be some overlap or connections for you as well. Try not to be funny. Leave that to us professionals. It's kind of tricky. It's hard to be funny in the first place, as I probably demonstrated throughout this talk, but it's also tricky in anything kind of written. People don't know you. They don't know your voice, so to speak. So, just be kind of straightforward with what it is that you said, and, hopefully that will do it. And if you have any kind of trepidation, seek out, someone else to take a look at it, a trusted adult, a parent, a professor, whoever else whose feedback that you value, to take a look at it. And again, once it goes out there, it's always editable. It's never, untweakable, unfixable. It's always, you can always change it anytime that you like. So I'm going to just kind of go through these very quickly, but also other resources besides LinkedIn. Look at other kinds of key websites and job lists that are out there. Talk to your contacts and your networks that you already have. You have them there. Maybe you don't even think about them as networks, but you've got professors, you've got classmates, you've got colleagues. Maybe if you're also working, alumni from IUPUI, I'm one of your networks now. And certainly also LinkedIn is social appropriate kinds of social networks. Depending upon what your interests are, just Google this. Let's say you're interested in conflict or international security or peace and justice or what have you. There's probably an organization for that. So see what that's like, see what they do, see if they have jobs, see if they have student dues levels that you might want to be able to join them. There's sometimes fellowship opportunities. I'll show you about Ashoka in just another slide, but there's also places that have mentoring programs. For example, there's a junior program officer position at the UN. The Catholic Relief Services in the United States has entry-level fellowships to kind of get your foot in the door and grow from there. Ashoka, I'm a big fan of. Bill Drayton is the founder of it. They are very much into social entrepreneurship. They have an Ashoka Fellows program. They are international in over 70 countries now. They have a program called Change Makers. They have competitions. It's just really an amazing place. So do check out ashoka.org if you're interested in these areas. And again, specifically, my bias is towards more nonprofit kinds of things. LinkedIn has a specific tool. If you want to go looking, and we've been talking about people finding you and headhunters and things with your profile, but you can also go look as well, too. So there's LinkedIn for nonprofits if that's where you perhaps want to specifically focus. So to kind of wrap up, and hopefully we'll have a little time for questions. If I was able to go back in time with my School of Science time machine, I just kind of want to leave you guys with some things that I'd like to leave as some tips. Be disciplined, but not too much. I've always kind of dealt with a lot of anxiety and the different kinds of things that I have done. And maybe that's why I get so obsessive compulsive about things, to try and be perfectionistic about it. But, done beats perfect. It doesn't mean to be sloppy, but, be disciplined with what you do, but not too much. Don't drive yourself crazy. If you're shy, that's too bad. Get out there anyway. I was shy when I was 22 and applying to graduate schools. I'm shy now. With everything that it is that I do, I'm quite inhibited to drive my wife a little crazy when we do social kinds of things. But what I found is that once I do get out there, even if it's like giving a talk or whatever, that I have a nice time. The talk generally goes well. People are generally kind and nice, and I have an opportunity to make some new connections and talk about interesting things with interesting people. So, please do push beyond that. There's going to be some bad times, but do keep in mind you'll make it. Sometimes you need to get some help to get through those bad times. That's fine. That's what friends and other professionals and professors and mentors are there for. And speaking of that, do get a mentor. If I needed a mentor for farming, I'd talk to my dad. If I needed a mentor for being a single parent, I'd talk to my mom. So if you have an interest in a certain kind of area, United Nations, quantitative psychology, experimental psychology, clinical psychology, engineering, I don't know what. Find someone that's an expert in those kinds of areas. They can be any age, any flavor, any ilk that might be able to have the time to lend a hand and to be able to be helpful for you. A little tip with that, though, don't just go asking for something from someone. Offer them something back in return. Hey, if I help you with this project, would you mind, giving me, an hour of your time a month to be able to let me bounce questions off you? Or can I keep you as a sounding board, just to ping you? I promise I won't, drive you crazy, but can I just email you, every so often when there's some kind of question that I can't get a right answer for? And probably 90% of the time you're going to get someone to say, yes, they would be happy to do that. But also keep your friends close too. They can be, I don't know if I necessarily call them mentors. I guess certainly in some cases that might be, but, keeping your friendships important and close relationships are critical as well too. Back to my little picture at the very start of all those roads, I think it's important to have a direction, but it doesn't have to be the right one or the only one. I mean, I am the poster boy for that type of thing, of taking turns and scenic routes and some of the ways, I've given you the highlight reel. I haven't told you about all the bad stuff, all the jobs I didn't get that I applied for, or, grants that, fizzled out and didn't get funded. So, that's fine. That's life. That's, the answer is always no if you don't ever ask, or if you don't ever apply, or if you don't ever try for something. But, I just think it's so important to go in a direction, but don't necessarily stay stuck in that direction if for some reason that direction no longer seems to be a good fit for whatever it is that you want to do. And obviously, again, I'm certainly walk the talk on that. Especially when you start out, do some things for free. That doesn't mean that, obviously volunteering is always kind of a free thing, but, sometimes having that summer internship that isn't paid versus, oh, it'd really be great to have a paid internship, may lead to other kinds of good opportunities. It's just, especially when you start off, when I first started off, I probably said yes to more things than I should, just because I was nervous that people would quit asking. And now kind of in later years, it's kind of, at some point that kind of changed, that as Derek Sivers says, that unless it's a hell yes, it's a no. But for right now, I think for everybody, my bias is that it should be generally pretty much a hell yes for just about everything that comes your way, if it's a good fit for you. Not things that aren't a good fit, use common sense. And really, don't put things off. I often have a talk in another, or a slide in another talk that I call the pox of the Antilles. A lot of times we say, well, I'm going to wait till I graduate. I'm going to wait till I get married. I'm going to wait till I get divorced. I'm going to wait till I get a job. I'm going to wait till I get a kid. I'm going to wait till my kid graduates. I'm going to wait till I retire. Then all of a sudden, you've waited and waited and waited. And now, opportunities don't keep coming your way. The people quit asking, et cetera. So don't necessarily, again, balance this out with don't overwhelm yourself, but don't put things off. Look forward to the kinds of things that you have opportunity for. Claim ownership rights for the things that you do, regardless if they're paid or not. Go for that, publication attribution if you've contributed to it, or at least a footnote if you ran the stats for that published study. Every so often, just lose yourself, have fun, go do what it takes to blow off some steam that's safe and not crazy. And really, I like to say to people, kind of now's the time to mess up. You have opportunity to kind of experiment and kind of see what works, see what fits, keep what fits, let go of what doesn't work. And one last test, if you kind of get to the point where you start to doubt your work, is that if you do doubt your work, chances are you're doing it right. So to kind of recap, there's really no fixed set of rules or no specific path that you have to follow. Certainly don't follow mine, because it works for an N of one. It worked for me. Pieces of it may fit for you. Ideas, hopefully I've given you, may be helpful for you. But I really think it's a thing about tools. And this is what I mentioned. If you go to issue.com/Dr. Chris Stout, it stacks. You'll see all my notes for this talk. You'll see a PowerPoint set of a deck that's even larger than this deck. There that you can take a look at, and there's probably, I'll kid you not, there's probably 3 pages of single-spaced hypertext links about everything that we've talked about, including the goofy pictures that I have. And if you want to see the long version of this or other videos that I have, you can go to YouTube and check out my channel there as well. So I really do. I'm a big fan of tools. This is kind of what those things look like when you get into those areas. So I know we're probably a little shy on time, but for whatever time, I can stick around a bit if other people, I know you've got other things going on with your calendars and probably needing to get out of town for holidays and things like that. But I am available right now for whatever time we have left to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Feel free to turn on your microphone and your video if you'd like to just ask it out loud.
Hi, this is Maria. I don't know if you guys can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. First
Hey.
off, thank you so much for, your time and the opportunity and your insight.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So you provided a lot of opportunities for us to go on websites and look at internships and scholarships. But I'm wondering how are you how did you decide when you first started out with no experience which ones to apply to? Because obviously without prior experiences, you don't know which one will work out for you. Was it like just a gut feeling or trial and error?
Are you referring to like a graduate program or an internship, or what specifically?
More so, I guess, an internship.
Okay. For me, with internships, it's in the context of I was finishing up my doctorate. So part of my requirement, in addition to my dissertation, was doing what's called a pre-doctoral internship. And there are a specific finite group of those that are accredited. So that automatically starts to whittle things down to how many there are. Generally, for most of us, we kind of wish there were more than what there was. For me, I didn't want to have to move away from where I was living in Chicago at that point in time. So I really wanted to do internships that were around Chicago. I also had an interest in what became hospital practice. So there were about, if memory serves, gosh, this is a way back machine. I probably applied to 10 or 12 internships, and I probably, of those, let's call it 12, probably 5 of them were in psychiatric hospitals. So those 5 are the ones that I really, bore down on, so to speak. I mean, I was serious about all of them, and took every application and every interview quite seriously with them. But they're also very competitive, and I was sort of lucky. I was able to get in 2 offers at the end of the day, and one of the offers was in a place that was very geographically close to where I live, so there was a convenience variable in that. And the other was that it had a good stipend. At the time, in the era that I did, in my classmates, not all internships were even funded. So it's sort of like this: would I take an unfunded internship that was more prestigious, or would I take a funded internship that was less prestigious, but had these other kinds of positives for it? And another complicating factor, personal to me, was that my wife and I met in graduate school, and she the next year would be applying to internships. So I didn't want to, be across the country in California, so I didn't even apply to internships across the country. So, personal kinds of things, economic kinds of things, trying as best as I could, channel my magic 8-ball to what the future might hold for me in terms of career opportunities. And I wanted to work in psychiatric hospitals. When I first started, when I left IUPUI, I thought I'm going to work as an outpatient adult psychologist. And when I finished my doctorate, I worked in an inpatient child and family therapist. So that's the thing, I had a direction of clinical psychology, but I changed my path and was very happy to have that kind of change. So I hope that answers your question. So I guess I would say weigh all the practical, mechanical kinds of variables as well as you could best forecast the future to say which internship might lead to the eventual career or research opportunities or academic kinds of placements that might help me the best, help me the most, and that soberly that I have a good chance of being able to get in. Some people just do prestige applications. Oh, I applied to this Ivy League or that Ivy League or this prestigious program, knowing all good and well that they would never get in unless there was some fluky kind of bizarre thing that happened, which I suppose can happen sometimes. But that's more based out of ego than I think reality, and just wastes everybody's time.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sure.
We have a question in the chat. Val asked that she plans on hopefully going to grad school out of state. Are there any tips for applying?
You bet. It depends upon, I apologize if you already know about this, but the American Psychological Association has great resources for graduate students. There's APAGS, the American Psychological Association for Graduate Students, and they have now probably online. I had a big book back in the day when I was doing it, but that you can kind of look at what those out-of-state programs offer in terms of probably, I might be a little out of date with this, but I found in the old days, clinical programs were a little bit more difficult to get into, a little bit more competitive. Back in 1981, it was easier to get into medical school than it was graduate school in clinical psychology. So if you go into programs that are very prestigious, but also maybe might have funding, might be one of the first things to look at. Like if you could get funding to go to a program, as a graduate student, there might be research opportunities, being a research assistant or a TA, being a teaching assistant with the programs. So a lot of times people, if you're in a good position, like experimental programs are good about that. Some neuroscience programs are good about that. So that might be depending upon the variables of what your specific needs and interests are. And also just like I mentioned in the prior answer, geographical kinds of things. If you don't have a specific area that you want to go to, then, you can kind of take all comers. If you're specifically interested in the East Coast or the West Coast or the South or wherever it might be, then that's going to kind of, be this shrinking of the potential pool of all those kinds of programs. If you say, hey, I'm footloose and fancy free, whatever program gives me the best deal, then that's where I'll move to. So then that might bring in other kinds of variables to say, wow, then maybe the best deal is in San Francisco, but the cost of living is ridiculous. And so that might mitigate that being, your top choice. So you might, again, just kind of, get a cup of coffee and a blank piece of paper and brainstorm what kinds of programs am I interested in? What do I want to do after finishing that kind of program? What's the likelihood of getting into that program? What's the likelihood of getting funded to get into that program? What's the likelihood of staying on? Do they have postdoctoral kinds of opportunities or instructor opportunities or things like that? And any other variables that are important to you, lifestyle issues, partner issues, climate issues, anything along those lines might help, you kind of winnow down the entire United States potential of where it is that you might want to go.
We had another question in the chat. Any tips for gap years for students?
Sure. I think that I have to say this like from the position of anxiety. I mean, for me, probably what I do is kind of think about what I want to do after that gap year and then say, okay, do I need to do anything now? Do I need to plant any seeds that will germinate and be, ready to go like 12 months from now? And then I would do those things and then say, great, I did that. And that can be off my plate, out of my mind, off my mind and not something that I'm going to just worry about every day that I'm not doing that. So first of all, I just say, clear the deck, do whatever you think you might need to do in preparation for, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, whatever. You don't want to get caught, short going, oh my gosh, the application date for this graduate program was when? So again, I'm focusing on graduate school, but, jobs would be a little different if that's not one of the issues. I would say, scratch the itches that you have. Like I said, this is the time to mess up. This is the time to kind of experimenting, to kind of see what's out there. Depending upon, and it might also be a time, it might be a time for you to think about how can I be, I'm again, sorry to default always to graduate school, but if I want to get into graduate school and I think I'm, pretty good as everybody else, but I want to do the Scott Adams thing, maybe there's this really competitive neuroscience program, a PhD program. And one of the things that would really distinguish me is if I had a greater background in statistical analysis. So maybe I'll take a couple of classes in R, maybe I'll learn SAS, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. And hopefully you would enjoy that. And if you didn't enjoy that, then you might go, maybe I don't want to get into more quantitative stuff. Or if you did enjoy that, then to say, oh, this is awesome. And now you've just kind of, had a nice time doing that, not being pressured by taking 20 other classes. Being able to kind of do what it is you want to do. Of course, all these kinds of things get predicated on how are you living? Do you have a partner that you can hang out with for a year and they don't mind you not paying rent? Or do you need, to get that barista job to be able to make ends meet, or to have healthcare insurance, the practical kinds of things, or, keeping your car going? You have a benevolent family situation where you can stay with a sibling or a parent or something like that until, you decide to go back to graduate school. If that does happen, I would just say out of comfort for your relationship with whoever, might be benevolent to you to have them stay with you, is to be clear, as to what your intentions are, that this is not an infinite, couch surfing kind of situation, that this is finite, it's transitional. This is an opportunity of, give me a month to kind of catch my breath, get over graduation, et cetera, and then start to, really full-throatedly look into the kinds of things that I'm interested in. And I would say, test and try, rinse and repeat, see what fits, let it, keep going with it, see what fits, try something else. And if it doesn't fit, let it go. But if you have that kind of opportunity and that kind of interest, or maybe this is the year that you do traveling. I mean, COVID, certainly knocked that out of the ballpark for us. And what is traveling? Maybe you've saved up some money and you spend 2 months in Europe on your rails and whatever other kinds of means to get around and staying in hostels. Maybe this is the time to scratch that itch, or maybe it's packing up the car and driving across the countries where you have a little less costs, hopefully, with that kind of a thing, and being able to not be beholden to classrooms and an employer. So it's a great question, but there's so many different variations on the answer depending upon your idiosyncratic situation that the best I can do is say, just blue sky, brainstorm, start off with all the crazy kinds of ideas, see what might work, think about those, picture in your mind, visualize what might indeed that look like. Is that really something that I would want to do? If it is, then how can I put that together? I had a guy on my podcast twice who rode his motorcycle around the world, first by himself, second with his girlfriend. And, he did 3 years, and his whole time doing that, he called it 2 wheels, 1 world, no money. And he just basically, he would do kind of like being a digital nomad, and he did film editing and stuff. He wound up doing a documentary too, but that didn't pay until the end. But he laid tile, he picked cherries, he, did whatever it kind of took during that time so he could see the world on his motorcycle. So there's a variety of different kind of, with Google and the internet, we can kind of, check out all these kinds of nomadic kinds of things, or, doing that job or that process that we always wanted to do. This is probably one of the best times to do it, especially if you're planning on going to graduate school. If it's a job, might be a little different, but graduate school for sure.
Right. If anybody has any other questions, we don't have anything more in the chat. We had a couple of people who had to hop off, but just said thank you for your time, and the information
Sure.
was very helpful.
Yeah, I know we're running long. So, well, and again, for whoever's left, I just really very much appreciate you guys having me here. People can feel free to reach out, contact me, just simply drchristout@gmail.com, which is real easy. And if there's resources or anything else, I can't imagine that there's anything in a couple of the links there at the tail end that wouldn't open up more stuff than you ever have time to even look at. But do feel free, bounce a question off me. I can bounce ideas and brainstorm with you, etc. Right now, travel is starting to pick up for me, so I will try to get back in touch with anybody that reaches out to me in a prompt kind of way, but sometimes it's a little more of a lag than it is others, but happy to keep in touch and be of help in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Stout, for your time today. And also, we'll be putting this information on the School of Science website as well, with links to all of his his YouTube channel and all of his resources as well, so you can find it easily in the future. And thanks for everyone for coming out today. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, guys.